that was a mistake, and look how much it hurt him. You see, the Bible shows us every time we make a wrong choice, it impacts us. And Proverbs clearly says, gives us that illustration as well, how, Lady Wisdom is in the world, and when people make good choices, it benefits them. When they make bad choices, eventually down the line, it impacts them.
Yeah.
It's in the world. You see it. You see wisdom. You see her in life.
Hey everyone, hopefully you're doing well. Welcome to the Jesus King podcast. I'm here with Emil. How you doing, Emil?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Today we're going to speak about how Christians can make bad decisions, right? And that's the foolishness of man, is that even though we follow a very wise God, an all-knowing God, we often find ourselves making many mistakes. Yeah. And the example we want to use today is actually Lot himself in Genesis. Lot was a righteous man. Yes. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7, he speaks about that God delivered the righteous Lot who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked.
Amen.
Right? So Lot was a person that Peter would consider to be a righteous man. Yeah. Is a man that loved the Lord. He would not actually do the things that Sodom and Gomorrah would do. Yet, when you look at the life of Lot, you start to see, man, Lot actually made a lot of unwise decisions.
Absolutely.
Which actually harmed him. And on the thumbnail, we've got a guy that's actually sowing the branch that he's sitting on.
Yeah.
So we start to see how Lot's decisions unfortunately impact him a lot in his life.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't reject God, but his choices led him into dangerous compromises.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And now, can we start actually with the decision that he made to separate from his uncle? Because in the beginning, he did the right thing. When God called Abraham out, he took Lot with him. And that's an act of faith on 100%. Lot's part as well.
100%. Right? Maybe a part for his uncle, but also a part for God.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're like, dude, my uncle's telling me to go out with him, and I don't even know where we're going to go. We're most likely going to be living from one tent to another, but I'm going to do that. Right? So he did that until they both became really big, right? Yeah. They had many servants, they had many flock, and you're like, okay, we both cannot live in one land, in the same land.
There was disagreements. Yeah. Like, my flock wants to drink from the water. No, my flock, it's my turn. I can imagine it. It's easy to imagine. Yeah.
First world problems, by the way.
But look, it's fair enough. They need to expand. That's fair. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's fair. Like it's not. I wouldn't say it's a compromise on his morals. Not yet.
Yeah. And then with that we see that Abraham gives him the option.
Yeah.
And I like the wisdom of Abraham. He's like, all right, Lot, what would you like? There's the land. Where would you like to choose to live? Right? Wherever you choose,
I'll go
you have your first choice. I'll go to the other side. And that's an act of wisdom on Abraham's part. But it would have been nice, it would have been wise from Lot to kind of continue in that wisdom.
Absolutely. I think Abraham, he wasn't trying to be cunning or anything. I think he genuinely loved his nephew, like a lot. And you see that later on in Genesis. And we'll get to that, of course. But he really loved his nephew. And out of the love for him, he said, you choose first. I'll rely on God. For me, I'm trusting in God anyway. I mean, he brought me all the way here. He's not going to leave me now. So you decide whatever you want. And at the end of the day, it's wise as well, because if it goes wrong, the only person Lot can blame is
himself.
Lot. Yeah. So I think it was a wise choice, but that wasn't the reason why he did it. He did it out of love.
Yeah, that's pretty important. And I think, well, the issue with that is, and I think Christians can make the same mistake, is that for the sake of pursuing success, we would compromise, I guess, where we want to be.
Integrity.
integrity could be, because Lot knew those cities, and he knew their way of life. As a married man, I would not want to be living in an environment like that.
I mean, he wasn't in the city. He was in its vicinity.
Yeah.
Right? So at that point in time, I wouldn't say the corruption of Sodom was influencing him yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah.
But the problem here is, this is the compromise he made. Instead of respecting his uncle and saying, no, uncle, you're the elder, you're my uncle, right? You choose, and whatever you decide, I will respect, and I'll do the opposite, which would have, I am sure and certain, it would have blessed him, right? But that already made the choice. He made the choice there that showed that he cared more about, at least a little, he cared more about his own prosperity than giving his uncle face, giving his uncle the respect he deserves. And look, right, this is a small mistake. It's small. And it seems logical from the outside perspective, right? I'm going to be near a big city. The walls of the city are protected. If I need to trade things, it's very easy. It's right next to me. If I need security, it's more secure there. There's guards. There's, if anyone tries to attack us, they'll see and, they'll defend us. Probably they'll get some payment from us, but it's added security. It seems logical. It makes logical sense.
Yeah.
But was it the right thing to do as a believer of God? No. I'm not saying he's a sinner now or anything like that, or he's no longer righteous. No. It's a mistake. Right? Would you agree?
Well, I mean, a bad decision is always going to be a bad decision, right? But the problem with that is kind of in seeking that success. And because he saw that the grass being green on that side,
literally,
right?
grass is green on the other side.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this looks really good for my servants, for the vast amount of wealth that I have and the animals I have. But then that very city, God is going to destroy. So it's interesting how, and this is part of the foolishness of man. You're going there and you're like, this is going to be a great success. God is going to the same destination and saying, this is going to be a great disaster.
Yeah.
You're like, which one's going to prevail? God's always going to prevail.
And I think we read that in Ecclesiastes where it's like you plan and you plan and you plan. At the end of the day, you think your life is in your controls, it's in your hands. It's vapor, it's smoke. You try to grab it and it disappears.
And I'm telling you, personally speaking, I've had those personal experiences where you're like, man, this is a very good idea. And you're like, a few weeks later or a few months later, you're like, oh, it's a terrible idea. So it's those things that where you're like, man, you think you've got something right. You think you've got it figured out, but God has a different plan.
Exactly.
And I think the difference between Abraham's decisions and Lot's decisions, Abraham really relied on God.
Absolutely.
On where to go.
And I think he learned that lesson, along the way. I mean, you see him making mistakes throughout his life. Look, Abraham, let's look at the mistakes he did. The biggest two I can think of is in Egypt, which he learned his lesson there.
Yeah.
And then again with Hagar, which, he had to let go of his firstborn son. For the people that don't know, he with his wife's permission, he couldn't have any children with Sarah, and eventually she told him, sleep with my handmaid and my servant, and that way I can have children through her.
Yeah.
And he did, because he no longer, like at that point, in moment of weakness, he stopped trusting in God, and he relied on his own flesh and logic. And eventually, when Sarah finally did have a kid, well, there's contention now, right, for who's the heir. So he had to get rid of, tell his firstborn son, even though he blessed him, but he had to tell him to leave, right? And that would have been difficult, very, very painful for him. But that was a mistake, and look how much it hurt him. You see, the Bible shows us every time we make a wrong choice, it impacts us. And Proverbs clearly says, gives us that illustration as well, how, Lady Wisdom is in the world, and when people make good choices, it benefits them. When they make bad choices, eventually down the line, it impacts them. Yeah. It's in the world. You see it. You see wisdom. You see her in life. And you see that in Genesis very clearly with Abraham and Lot. And I think let's continue with Lot. What's his next? What happens next? He gets captured by an army that invades Sodom and takes him and the Sodomites captive, correct?
And then Abraham rescues them.
Outnumbered.
Yeah.
And he does it out of love and faith.
But the thing is, like, you're like, all right, it's a dangerous place. You know you got captured. Why are you still there? And that's the problem. Is sometimes we make a mistake, we acknowledge the mistake,
go back to it,
and we have that attachment to that mistake.
Yeah, because we're familiar. It's familiar to us.
Yeah.
Oh, surely it won't happen again. And so what he does is he's captured. He's Abraham, outnumbered and outmanned through faith and through love, goes and fights for Lot, saves him, wins, loses some men, but wins, right? And there, like at that point, imagine Lot, instead of being grateful and saying thank you, uncle, he says, "Thank you, uncle. We're going to Sodom, not outside of Sodom. We're going inside Sodom now, because I'm sure Lot would have lost a lot of men.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't have that much, safety in numbers anymore. So he'd have to go into Sodom. So now he's in Sodom. He's exposed to the corruption and the moral compromise that comes with it. And you see his choices because of that.
Now it's like, I've got 2 daughters, and they need to start their families.
But they're in Sodom.
They're in Sodom. And the only men available are not from familiar men that if I was in my uncle's place, people from Sodom and Gomorrah.
So I think he prioritized worldly prosperity over spiritual well-being. And that's the mistake he did. And that sometimes we do that. We think that on the outside it looks like the right decision, but spiritually it's compromising us. And it's small little things. So we see that he went to Sodom. And then the angels of the Lord, right? With, of course, the angel of the Lord with the 2 angels that came with him. They came to Abraham, and then 2 of them left and went to Sodom. And they went and they met up with Lot, and the men of Sodom wanted those 2 angels, those 2 travelers. And Lot, trying to defend those men or protect them, decides, hey, to the men of Sodom, take my daughters instead. And I always thought that this was a reverence to the angels. This was some sort of respect to them. But then as I dove into the scripture and actually read it again, I saw that that wasn't the case. Although it may be a part of the case, but it was mostly the corruption of Sodom on him. For you to actually suggest that you'd give your daughters up to the Sodomites. And a lot of people make the argument, oh, he knew that they wouldn't take them. No, they slept with women too. It wasn't, men only went with men there. They went with everything. So he was serious. Take my daughters, please. Just leave these men safe. That wasn't something that a father should say.
No, he wouldn't. And plus, as the story goes on, we realize that those 2 daughters had
they were morally compromised. Yeah.
They had husbands, and he even went to the husband. He says, "Okay, we're packing up. We're going."
No,
they stayed there. So we can see those bad decisions in his life, but then the problem is, because you've compromised so much, you come to that extreme and you're like, what's this extra step?
What's another thing?
Yeah, what's another thing? And you talk about it, you're like, wait, it's a father that's giving the daughters away. Yeah, but put yourself there for years and years and years and seeing that corruption going on, and you're like, what's another compromise that I can take in my life?
I think it distorted his values. It distorted... It wasn't that he was a bad person now, but who he was had become distorted by where he was. And you see that in our lives now. And this is what we can take away from this, and especially with us. If we as children of God put ourselves in a place where children of God do not belong, it compromises us. Although it might not, make us children of the world straight away, and sometimes it doesn't at all, but it will compromise your integrity. It will compromise your character. It will compromise your judgment. It will compromise your morals. And by doing that, you become distorted from what God has you being, what God's image of you is. So if God's image of you is clear, by you adding this drop of dirty water to a crystal clear cup makes the whole crystal clear cup dirty.
Yeah, pollutes it all.
It pollutes it all. So the whole thing is worthless now. It's undrinkable. So you might think it's only a drop of dirty water, but now the whole thing's tainted. And that's what we see with Lot. You see that he made the wrong decision. And then when Sodom was destroyed and his wife turned to a pillar of salt, because again, she was also compromised as well, she began to love her home. She looked back at her home and turned to salt, disobeyed God. You see the disobedience in his whole family. And this is the prolonged exposure to sin. It eroded him. It eroded his judgment, eroded his character and his family too. And then instead of going to his uncle, he goes to a cave near Sodom.
Yeah.
And he gets drunk. And his daughters, they're scared. We're not going to have any heirs. We're not going to have anyone who wants to, ex-married, like widowers, whatever you want to call them. Who wants them? So they sleep with their father. They sleep with Lot. I mean, this is the ultimate takeaway from this. Like, it's, where did it lead him? Where did his small bad choices lead him?
I was literally gonna say that he would not even think about it in a million years, thinking, "Oh, if I take that side of,
I'm gonna end up in a cave with no wife, no home, all my people gone, and my daughter's getting me drunk and sleeping with me."
Yeah,
who would have thought that?
He would not. It would not come into.
Is
his
it
mind.
logical to think that? No,
it wouldn't be.
But
that's that's the crazy part. Is sometimes the compromise with the bad decisions is we think it's just a small bad decision. It's not going to go anywhere further.
Now, this isn't just a story, and I know it's an extreme example. It's very extreme, but often that's what it is. Our small choices lead us to a point where we don't even recognize ourselves anymore. Like, I know some Christians that end up in places like taking drugs and things when they never touched the stuff before, and they're like, how do we end up here? How do I end up selling my home, losing my wife, losing my kids, gambling everything, now hooked on drugs, now in jail? How did I end up here? Small choices.
Wow, yeah, it's very tough.
Small choices. It's little tiny choices that that one choice on its own, going left or right, choosing first, not respecting your uncle that much, doesn't seem like a big deal. But it is in the long run. In the grand scheme of things, because it wasn't the choices he made, it was the lack of trust in God. And what is wisdom without the foundation, which is the fear of the Lord, Martin?
Yeah.
What is a building without its foundation?
Nothing. It falls apart.
What is wisdom without its foundation?
Nothing. Foolishness.
What happened to Solomon when the fear of the Lord left him?
He started to get wise. He started to
was he still wise?
He still had his wisdom.
Worldly wisdom.
Yeah.
But where did it lead him? His worldly wisdom.
Yeah.
Where did it lead his kingdom? Where did it lead him? No.
It was all taken.
It was all taken from him. Because the wisdom of the world, look where it led Lot. I mean, according to like any worldly person would say, Lot made the logical and wise decision. But look where it led him. Because it wasn't wise spiritually. Because when you take away your trust and faith in God, all you're left with is destruction. All you're left with is ruin. There's nothing left for you.
Yeah. And I mean, if you go further, who are his descendants?
Yeah.
It's the enemies, the future enemies of Israel. Right? Yeah. Moab and I think Amnon.
I don't know about Moab, to be honest with
you. So you look at that and you're like, dude, not only were those decisions ruined his life, but it also is going to ruin future generational lives, his own descendants and the descendants of Israel. And that's what makes it very difficult. And you said, like, it does feel like an extreme example, but we can go through a lot of extreme things in our lives. So we cannot just say, oh, that was a lot. It's not going to happen to me. We cannot guarantee that.
No.
These bad decisions, picking up, for example, a cigarette when your friends were telling you, hey, why didn't you try it in high school? It led to a lifelong addiction. picking up a drink, gambling, doing whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or even just saying, oh, I really like my girlfriend. I want to sleep with her because that's the fun thing to do. And you're stuck with a child for the rest of your life. You're like, these decisions can follow you.
And look, I know a lot of Christians that say, hey, I never had intentions of sleeping with my girlfriend. Yeah, but you went on a holiday together and slept in the same hotel room. Oh, we had separate beds. Yeah, but you put yourself... Look, I think what this teaches us is we have to be intentional with our surroundings.
Yeah.
We have to be very careful and meticulous with what we surround ourselves with as Christians. And we have to be in environments that strengthen our faith, not weaken it. Because if we're weakening our faith and putting ourselves in positions that compromise us, and then we get compromised, we're like, how did this happen? I wonder why. It's literally like, the video, like the picture of the video that you're going to put in, which is a guy cutting off the branch that he's sitting on.
That's true. Bad company corrupts good character.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts you have on this?
I think staying rooted in God's wisdom helps us avoid Lot's mistake.
Amen. And from me, it's basically this. For the sake of chasing success in whatever it may be in your life and however it looks like, and leaving God, that's a very big mistake, because God will destroy anything that's outside of him. All that wickedness, all that sin, he will get rid of it. If you want true success, I will stay in God, because the end of Lot, you would not imagine that to happen to a person like that. And
he was a righteous man.
He was a righteous man. So I hopefully could encourage you in this. You could be a Christian and you could say, yes, my righteousness is in Christ and he saved me from my sins. But you can go through a very tough life making bad decisions. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Take care.